If you've ever missed someone so much that their absence became a permanent ache in your chest, a dull, quiet pain you carry every single day, then you already understand something about Marcus Webb before I even tell you his story. If this kind of story moves you, hit that like button right now and subscribe, because every week we bring you real stories about real people who chose love over giving up. Now let's get into it. Marcus Webb was 34 years old when he walked onto the set of Family Feud. He was a tall man with broad shoulders, the kind of guy who looked like he could handle anything. He wore a simple gray button-down shirt, neat dark jeans, and the kind of smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes, the smile of someone who has learned to look okay even when they're not. His team was the Webb family from Columbus, Ohio. His sister Diane, his cousin Ray, his Aunt Gloria, and his neighbor Tony, who had driven 6 hours just to be there for him. They were loud and warm and full of energy, but if you watched closely, you would notice that Marcus was always a half-second slower to laugh than everyone else, like he was always thinking about something, or someone. Steve Harvey noticed it immediately. Steve has hosted Family Feud for over a decade. He has seen thousands of families walk through those studio doors, families full of joy, families full of nerves, families with secrets written quietly on their faces. He has a gift for reading people, and from the moment Marcus Webb stepped onto that stage, Steve knew there was more to this man than a game show appearance. The opening rounds went well for the Webb family. They were competitive and funny, scoring well enough to make it to the fast money round. Marcus was sharp. He answered quickly, and his family cheered every time he got a point. But between questions, when the noise settled for just a moment, Marcus would get that look again, distant, like he was somewhere else entirely. After the first commercial break, Steve pulled Marcus aside the way he sometimes does with contestants who he senses have a story worth telling. He didn't ask anything heavy. He just said, "You doing all right, man? You seem like you've got something on your mind." Marcus laughed softly. "I'm good, Steve, I'm good." Steve nodded slowly and said, "All right, but if you feel like sharing anything today, anything at all, you've got a room full of people who want to hear it." Marcus nodded back. He didn't say anything, but something shifted in his eyes. By the time the Webb family won the main game and Marcus walked up to the fast money podium, the studio had already picked up on something. The energy around him was different from most contestants. People could feel it without being able to name it. There was weight in the air. Steve stood beside him and asked one simple question before they started. "Marcus, who are you playing for today?" And that's when everything changed. Marcus was quiet for a moment. He looked down at the podium. His hands were flat on the surface, and you could see them pressing down slightly, like he was steadying himself. Then he looked up, looked directly into the camera, and said in a voice so steady it almost broke your heart, "I'm playing for my daughter. Her name is Lily, and I haven't heard her voice in 19 years. The studio went still, not the polite, performative quiet of a game show audience waiting for the next moment. This was the real kind of silence, the kind where people stop breathing without realizing it. Steve Harvey didn't move. He stood there, let the silence hold, and then he said the only right thing, "Tell me." So Marcus told him, and as he spoke, the words came slow at first, then faster, like water finding its way through a crack in a wall that had been sealed for a very long time. Marcus had become a father at 15. He had been young and scared and completely unprepared for what that meant. His girlfriend at the time was 16. Her name was Danielle. They were kids who had no idea what they were doing, and they were trying to figure it out in a household that didn't have much patience for mistakes. When Lily was born, Marcus held her in that hospital room and felt something he had never felt before. He said it was like the whole world suddenly had a center point. Like everything before that moment had just been noise, and now there was something real. But he was 15, and scared, and the pressure from both families was enormous. Danielle's parents had never liked Marcus, and after Lily was born, the relationship between the two teenagers collapsed under the weight of it all. By the time Lily was 8 months old, Danielle had moved with her parents to another state. Marcus didn't have money for lawyers. He didn't have anyone to help him navigate what that meant legally. He was a teenage boy watching the center point of his world get further and further away, and he had no idea how to stop it. He tried everything he knew how to try. He called. He wrote letters, actual handwritten letters, because he didn't know Danielle's new address and had to send them through her aunt. Some of the letters came back unopened. Some didn't come back at all. He sent a birthday card for Lily's first birthday, then her second. He never heard back. By the time Lily was 3, the calls were being ignored. By the time she was 5, the number had been changed. Marcus grew up. He worked. He made mistakes and then worked harder. He got his GAD, then took night classes at a community college. He learned to be responsible because it felt like the only thing he could do to prove he was worth something, worth knowing, worth trusting, worth the title of father even if he couldn't use it. He thought about Lily every single day. He told Steve that he had never once gone to sleep without thinking about her. Not one night in 19 years. He didn't know where she was. He didn't know what she looked like. He didn't know if she knew he existed. He didn't know if she had been told he abandoned her or if she had been told nothing at all. That uncertainty, not knowing what story she had been given about him, was the thing that hurt the most. "Because I can handle her being angry at me," Marcus said, his voice beginning to shake for the first time. "If she hates me, I can handle that. I need her to know that I never stopped. I need her to know I didn't choose to leave." Steve Harvey has cried on his show before. He's not ashamed of it. But in that moment, he did something more powerful than cry. He stayed completely present. He looked Marcus directly in the eyes and said, "I hear you and I believe you." Then he said something else, something that would become one of the most shared clips in Family Feud history. He said, "Marcus, we have a phone on this set, and I don't usually do this. But today I'm going to ask you to do something. I want you to pick up that phone." The audience gasped. Marcus looked confused. "Steve, I don't have a number. I don't know where she is." Steve smiled. It was a slow, calm smile, the kind that says, "I know something you don't." He turned to the production team, and one of the producers walked onto the stage holding a clipboard. Steve took it, looked at it for a moment, then looked back at Marcus. "Our team did some research," Steve said. "We've been in contact with someone who knows how to reach Lily. She's 19 years old now. She lives in Portland, Oregon, and she knows you're here today." The silence that followed was unlike anything that studio had heard before. Marcus Webb put both hands over his face. His shoulders shook. His sister Diane was already crying from the family section. His Aunt Gloria had her hands clasped together, eyes closed, lips moving like she was praying. The audience was completely still. Not a single person was looking at their phone. Steve put a hand on Marcus's shoulder and said quietly, almost gently, "You ready?" Marcus lowered his hands. His face was wet. His eyes were red, but he nodded. The phone on the podium was a simple handset. It looked ordinary, but as Marcus reached for it, every person in that studio understood they were watching something that had nothing to do with a game show. This was 19 years of letters coming back unopened. 19 years of changed phone numbers. 19 years of birthday cards sent into silence. 19 years of a man going to sleep every night wondering if his daughter knew he had never stopped trying. He picked up the phone. There was a pause, then a voice. Young, clear, slightly nervous, female. "Hello, is this Marcus?" Marcus closed his eyes. His whole face changed. It was like watching someone step out of a room they had been locked in for 2 decades. He said, and his voice barely made it out, "Lily, yes, this is your dad." What happened next is something that resists simple description. Because what filled that studio wasn't drama, it wasn't performance, it wasn't the manufactured emotion of a script. It was 2 human beings, a father and a daughter, separated by a story neither of them fully wrote, finally hearing each other's voices. Lily said she had found his letters. Not all of them, many had never reached her, but a few had survived, stored in a shoebox by her grandmother who had quietly held onto them without telling anyone. When Lily was 17, she had gone looking through old boxes in her grandmother's basement after the older woman passed away. She had found the shoebox. She had sat on the concrete floor of that basement and read every letter, and she had cried for 3 hours. She had spent 2 years trying to find him. She found his name through public records, found that he still lived in Columbus, found a phone number that was disconnected, found a Facebook profile that hadn't been updated in years. She had almost given up. And then someone from the Family Feud production team had reached out to her through a mutual contact, because they had done their own research when Marcus submitted his application and written, in a small box at the bottom of the form, that he had a daughter he hadn't spoken to in 19 years and that he was playing the game for her. The producers had read that line, and they hadn't ignored it. Lily said she was scared. She said she didn't know what to feel. She said she had so many questions and so much anger and so much sadness, and somewhere underneath all of it, something she had only recently let herself feel hope. Marcus listened to every word. He didn't interrupt. He didn't defend himself or explain himself or ask her to understand. He just listened. And when she was done, he said, "I know you have every right to feel all of that, and I'm not asking you to feel anything you don't feel. I just want you to know, and I need you to know this, Lily, I never stopped, not one day." She was quiet for a moment, then she said, "I know, Dad, I read the letters." And that was the moment the studio broke. Steve Harvey turned away from the camera. His hand came up to cover his eyes. In the audience, strangers were hugging each other. 2 women who had never met before were holding hands. An elderly man in the 3rd row was quietly crying into a handkerchief. Marcus's Aunt Gloria had her face buried in her hands and was rocking back and forth, not from grief but from something closer to relief, the relief of a family being made whole. The conversation between Marcus and Lily lasted 11 minutes on air. They talked about small things and enormous things. He asked her what she was studying. She said environmental science. She wanted to work on clean water access. He laughed and said she must have got her brain from somewhere other than him. She laughed too. It was the first time they had ever laughed together. Before the call ended, they made a plan. A real, specific calendar entry plan. She would fly to Columbus in 3 weeks. He would pick her up from the airport. They would go to dinner. She was vegetarian, which he wrote down carefully on a piece of paper a producer handed him, like it was the most important piece of information he had ever received. Which in that moment it was. When Marcus put down the phone, he stood very still for a few seconds. Then he turned to Steve Harvey, and the two men, one a television host who had seen everything, one a father who had waited 19 years for a moment like this, embraced in the way that men who have been through something real together do. Not a performance, just two human beings recognizing the weight of what had just happened. Steve stepped back and said to the audience and the cameras, "Y'all, this is why we do this. Not the game, not the points, this, right here." The audience gave Marcus Webb a standing ovation that lasted nearly 2 minutes. In the days after the episode aired, the clip of Marcus picking up that phone became one of the most watched clips in Family Feud's digital history. It was shared millions of times across social media. The comments sections were flooded with people sharing their own stories of estrangement, reunion, regret, and hope. People wrote about fathers they hadn't spoken to in decades, about children they had lost track of, about phone calls they had been meaning to make for years but hadn't, about how the clip made them pick up their own phones. One man wrote that he called his estranged son for the first time in 11 years the same night he watched the clip. He said his son picked up on the second ring. He said they talked for 2 hours. A woman wrote that she had been adopted at age 6 and had always been too afraid to search for her biological mother. She said watching Marcus reach for that phone gave her the courage to start searching. 3 months later, she found her. A father in rural Tennessee wrote that he had been so ashamed of a decision he made when his daughter was young that he had convinced himself she was better off without him in her life. He said watching Marcus made him realize that absence is its own kind of message, and it's not the one he wanted to send. He drove 4 hours to see his daughter the following weekend. She opened the door when he knocked, and they stood on the porch and looked at each other for a long time, and then she stepped aside and let him in. A teenage boy wrote in saying he had watched the clip with his mother and that it made him call his dad for the first time in 3 years. He said it was awkward and neither of them knew what to say. But the call happened. And sometimes that is the whole victory, the call happens. These are not exceptions. These are the ripples. Marcus and Lily met in Columbus 3 weeks after the episode filmed, exactly as they had planned. He was standing at the arrival's gate when she walked through. He had no idea what she looked like. He had only seen a photo the production team had shown him backstage. But he said he recognized her instantly. He said she had his hands, the same long fingers, the same way of holding them. He said he stood there watching her walk toward him and thought, "There you are. I've been looking for you for 19 years. They hugged for a long time without saying anything. He took her to a vegetarian restaurant downtown. They sat across from each other and talked for 4 hours. She asked him questions, hard ones. He answered them honestly without making excuses, without asking for her sympathy. He told her about the letters, about the disconnected numbers, about going to legal aid twice and being told that without money for an attorney, his options were limited. He told her about the birthday cards he had sent every year until he no longer had an address to send them to, and how he had started writing them anyway and keeping them in a folder, just to have somewhere to put his love for her when the world gave him no other place. She sat across from him and listened. And then she said something that Marcus later described as the thing that healed him more than anything else in his life. She said, "I believe you." Those 3 words. After 19 years of not knowing what story she had been told about him. After 19 years of wondering if she thought he had simply chosen not to be there. After all the letters that came back, all the phone numbers that were changed, all the birthdays he had quietly marked on a calendar in his apartment just because he couldn't bear to let the day pass without acknowledging it in some way. After all of that, 3 words from a 20-year-old woman sitting across a dinner table from him in Columbus, Ohio, were enough to undo something that had been wound tight inside him for 2 decades. He didn't cry at the table. He held it together. But he told Steve Harvey later, in an interview they filmed backstage after the follow-up segment, that he sat in his car in the restaurant parking lot for 25 minutes afterward because he couldn't drive. Not because he was sad, because he was so deeply, completely relieved that his whole body had gone quiet. Like a machine that had been running at full power for 19 years had finally, for the first time, been allowed to stop. They didn't become instant best friends. That would be a neat ending to a complicated story, and life doesn't usually work that way. There were hard conversations. There were moments where old pain came up and needed to be sat with rather than rushed past. There were times Lily needed space, and Marcus gave it to her without question because he had learned the difference between chasing someone and being present for them. But they kept showing up. They called each other every week. She sent him a photo of a paper she wrote for her environmental science class, and he printed it out and put it on his refrigerator. He went to Portland to see her campus. She came back to Columbus for Thanksgiving and sat at the same table as his Aunt Gloria, who held Lily's face in both hands and said, "We have been praying for you since before you were born," and meant every word. 1 year after the Family Feud episode aired, Marcus and Lily appeared together on a follow-up segment. They walked out onto the stage side by side, and when the audience saw them together in person, the room erupted before either of them said a single word. Steve Harvey, who rarely shows emotion in the way that reads as unguarded, stood up from his host position and started clapping. He wasn't hosting in that moment. He was just a man who was glad about something. Lily spoke first. She said that finding her father had not erased 19 years of confusion or pain. She said she was not here to pretend that everything was perfect or that the story had a simple lesson. But she said that what she had found in Marcus was something she hadn't expected. Not a perfect father, but an honest one. A man who looked her in the eyes and told her the truth. A man who had never stopped being her father even when he had no way to act like one. She said that was the thing she had needed most, not rescue, not explanation, but honesty. And she had gotten it. Marcus said very little during the segment. He mostly just sat there next to his daughter with a look on his face that people who have waited a very long time for something and then actually gotten it will recognize immediately. He said one thing that the audience and viewers at home would not forget. He said, "Every single day for 19 years, I thought about what I would say to her if I ever got the chance. And now that she's here, I don't have the words, because no words are big enough. All I can tell you is she was worth every day I waited, and I would wait 19 more." Lily reached over and took his hand. The audience didn't make a sound, they just watched, because some moments don't need applause, they just need witnesses. In the months that followed, Marcus became involved in a mentorship program in Columbus for young fathers in situations similar to the one he had been in at 15 young men who were being separated from their children by circumstances they didn't have the tools to navigate. He talked to them not as someone who had figured everything out, but as someone who had lived through the consequences of a system that doesn't support young fathers and who understood what it cost. He told them document everything, write the letters even if they come back, keep the birthday cards even if there's no address to send them to. Don't let shame convince you to disappear. Disappearing feels like sparing people, but it isn't. Presence, even imperfect, even limited, even complicated, is always better than absence. And never, ever stop believing that the door can open. Because sometimes, 19 years later, someone hands you a phone. And the voice on the other end says your name like it's the answer to a question they've been carrying their whole life. Lily graduated with her degree in environmental science the following spring. Marcus was in the auditorium. He sat next to Aunt Gloria, who cried the entire time and kept squeezing his arm. When Lily's name was called and she walked across the stage, Marcus stood up. He didn't cheer loudly or make a scene. He just stood up and watched his daughter receive her diploma, and he let that be enough. He let that moment mean everything it meant. She looked out into the audience. She found him. She smiled. He smiled back. 19 years, one phone call, and a shoebox full of letters that a grandmother kept just in case the day ever came when they would matter. There is something important in this story that goes beyond the reunion, beyond the television moment, beyond the viral clip. It is this: Marcus Webb did not become the father his daughter needed by being perfect. He became the father she needed by being consistent, by writing the letters, by sending the cards, by not letting shame talk him into disappearing, by showing up to that game show and writing in a small box at the bottom of a form that he had a daughter he hadn't spoken to in 19 years, not because he thought anything would come of it, but because the truth needed somewhere to go. We live in a world that is very good at telling people they have missed their chance, that too much time has passed, that the damage is too deep, that the person on the other side has moved on and built a life without you in it, and the kindest thing you can do is stay out of it. Marcus Webb is proof that this is sometimes the voice of shame pretending to be wisdom. There is a difference between respecting someone's boundaries and convincing yourself that you're not worth showing up for. Marcus never stopped. He didn't know if it would ever matter. He had no guarantee, no sign, no evidence that his daughter even knew he existed. But he kept going anyway, because that's what love does when the door is closed. It doesn't stop knocking. It slides letters under the door. It writes birthday cards to a folder. It fills out the bottom of a game show application with the truth and hopes that someone somewhere reads it. And Steve Harvey, who has been credited with making it happen, pushes back on that framing every time it comes up. He says what he did was nothing. He says the production team did the research. He says all he did was hand a man a phone. The real work, he says, had already been done. 19 years of it. In letters, in birthday cards, in a man who went to sleep every night refusing to believe the story was over. The story of Marcus Webb is a story about what love looks like when it has nowhere to go. It looks like keeping the cards in a folder. It looks like writing the letters even when they come back. It looks like walking onto a game show stage in a gray button-down shirt and answering trivia questions with your whole chest while the real reason you came is sitting quietly underneath everything, waiting for someone to ask. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, someone asks. And you get to pick up the phone. And the voice on the other end says your name. And after 19 years of silence, that is everything. If Marcus and Lily's story meant something to you, if it reminded you of someone you've been meaning to call, a relationship you've been meaning to repair, a truth you've been meaning to say out loud, don't wait 19 years. Pick up that phone today. And if you want more stories like this one, stories about real people who chose love over giving up, who kept going when there was no sign it was worth it, who got the phone call they had been waiting for, hit that like button and subscribe. We put out a new story every week, and every single one of them is a reminder that it's not over until it's over. We'll see you in the next one.